As Max mentioned, I'll be sharing some of the insights into the success drivers we experience at New Relic for six-figure plus deals. Those experience come mostly from the SaaS business, but I think they're highly relatable to any other B2B sales process and kind of transferable. So we heard before from Armin about how you get leads, how you get to that crucial meeting. We heard about Medic right now, and I think what I'm talking about will kind of complement that nicely. So what you see in the background here is the POC process, which comes once you had that initial meeting and once you actually have buy-in into a POC from multiple stakeholders or one stakeholder driving the POC. What I experience is that there is, roughly speaking, three kind of important types of groups involved in POC, and that the POC has like two different process streamlines. So you see on the upper side, you see the POC itself, which is there to test your product and create value for your prospect so that your prospect decides to actually buy your product. And this will be your user group. And on the lower side, you see the administrative procurement process, which we already touched upon in the previous talk. And that procurement process is mostly done by procurement process functions such as procurement itself, legal, data privacy, IT, compliance, and so on and so on. I'm not going to dive into it too much, as it has kind of enough content to have a session by itself, as complexity varies from different companies. And in the middle of it all, you have the executives. The executives, they're definitely involved in the administrative procurement process. However, what you want to have is that they are also involved in the POC itself, and that you, when you run a POC with teams, also create value for them, so you have a lot of buy-in. What I want to say about the administrative procurement process, as for six-figure deals, there will be a lot of steps involved. It is really important that you meticulously see this as a project management task. From the beginning on, when you had that initial meeting, you know that the procurement process that the POC will start. You need to connect to all the stakeholders involved in the administrative procurement process, meet with them, create deliverables, and make sure those deliverables are met. Because if you do not have legal approval, you'll not get a commercial agreement over the line, even though people want to buy your product. On the other side, you have the POC process, which is, I think, in my opinion at least, even more vulnerable. You have a lot more people you need to talk to, different departments, different stakeholders, and with more people also comes more likelihood that people don't meet their commitments. On one hand, I think you can mitigate that risk by being even more meticulous about the project management side of it and really making sure everyone meets their commitments. However, how likely is it that everyone will do that? Doesn't happen too often, especially with large deals. Therefore, my advice would be build in some buffer and timeline, so you're not going to find yourself at the end of the quarter and your timeline slips and you're not going to make that deal in time. What I think also is really a crucial point at the beginning is making sure that metrics and business KPIs are communicated, which are an agreed upon success of the POC. So at the end of the POC, make sure that you really will sell that product to them. And I want to dig deeper into the user groups of your product and the executives. Two important things I see when running a POC is, on one hand, you really need to make that connection. I've seen that in the past when I started selling, that a lot of times when you had that C-level meeting, you would get probably, if you make a convincing and compelling argument and a compelling case, you might even sell your product even without a user group buy-in. Now I feel that with more and more software on the market, executives learned that if you buy software, you also need to have your user group involved when testing it. Because without, you might buy software which will not be actually applied in the way you intended, and the value which the salespeople person pitched to you will actually not be achieved. So it's really important to not only go to executives, not only to go to user groups, but make sure you have both involved when you run a POC. Like we talked about reaching out to executives, having that meeting. In my opinion, that's the ideal case, but I experience a lot of times executives might not be involved directly from the start. So what I think is really important, making sure that you exhaust all options to connect to those executives. And I think one way is executives don't necessarily like to talk to salespeople. Make sure you connect them to executives from your company. It makes a lot of sense. They like to talk to peers. Obviously, that's not the only thing. You need to create value for them. You need to convince them why they need to be involved. On the other side, it's really important that they are involved. Otherwise, you have no control what they are going to do in the process, and they might become rather a blocker than an economic buyer or champion for you. The other part is also highly important, and those are the user groups. The users of your product, they might not be as powerful as the executives, but they come in a larger number. So you need to have a majority of the users on your side in order to make a compelling case to the executives to buy your product. Make sure that you involve all the resources that you have on hand in your company and align them to them. They need a lot of guidance and support, and also you might not, as a salesperson, always speak their language. There might be people better suited to speak the language of the user group. Technical people, marketing people, depending on what kind of product you're selling. Now, when you're connected to those two types, you need to make sure that you're creating value. And what I really see there is when you're running large POCs, you're talking mostly to multiple departments. Those multiple departments might not necessarily all have the same goals, the same application of your product. So how do you get the majority of the people involved? Make sure you're not pushing product. Really push use cases and make sure you have a useful application for each different persona, each different department. If you make sure that those use cases are underlined with viable metrics, business KPIs, you will have much higher success in having a majority of the user group on your side. However, one thing, you also need to make sure that those use cases and those business KPIs of the departments actually translate into a business initiative. If you're having use cases worked out with departments and those do not mean anything to the business initiatives the executives run, you will not close a large deal. You'll need to make sure that those use cases translate to a business initiative. Now, an easy example would be selling a CRM system. If I'm selling a CRM system, I might talk to sales ops. Sales ops can decrease their workload. They can save time. I might talk to marketing, preparing a campaign. They can improve conversions due to the insights they gain. I might talk to support. They have better data, they can answer their clients faster. All of that can translate to business initiatives, such as increased profitability by decreasing costs, growing customer base, decreasing churn. So that way, you have a meaningful way of talking to executives and you're actually creating value to them. Now, what I think is the really nice outcome of having this situation when you made, on one hand, you have the majority of the users on your side. You have use cases in place, and you actually have solutions which are directly impacting company business initiatives. You're able to build quantifiable return of investment. You will be able to show them a number which is a really rational argument for maximized investment into your product. One thing which I would want to say about the return of investment, try to push an estimate as soon as possible when you're in a POC to as many people as possible and as often as possible before you actually make a first offer to them. When they are testing out your product and you're actually showing them a number, how much value this will generate to them, they will recognize this. They will connect what they're experiencing with the return of investment. However, if you're using the return of investment in combination with your offer, it will be seen as a negotiation lever, so it will not have the power you're intending to. One other thing, and I think the previous talk already touched upon it. When you have all that information worked out and you have all the relationships in place, one really important thing for the process is have a compelling event. So when you're having a compelling event on the client side, that might be seasonality. The client has to prepare for a big sale on Black Friday. Might be that shareholders are pushing for the next 3 months that profitability has to increase. It might be that a key employee left who was maintaining an internal CRM system. Nobody knows the heck how it works anymore. So you need to have that compelling event worked out. Otherwise, you have no control over timeline. You can create a compelling event or think you create a compelling event by giving discounts, giving higher volumes, but at the end of the day, that's happening on your side. If you have a compelling event in place, it's happening on the client side. So when you have that compelling event, you strengthen really the timeline commitment, and you can have much more control of the process. Make sure you close in time. Have a nice quarter. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Go ahead. Yeah. Are you the one who is pushing to talk to this champion, or would you train, or would you expect the first contact person at the company to come to you and say, you know what, I think I have to involve the CMO, the CTO, or someone. So how would you, in a practical case, go try to reach this multiple user group?
Okay. Can we do a quick recap of the question?
Can we do I think I actually got the let me summarize it, check if I got it correctly. Cool. So what you're asking, how am I actually going to get that broad contact to all those different departments, making sure I'm connected to the executives, making sure I'm connected to the user groups. Is that correct? So, I mean, what's really, in my experience, the easier part is connecting to the user groups, because you'll have departments. In each department, there'll be people which are willing to talk to you. They have less time constraints than the executives. They are interested in your product. There's an initiative running even that they need to, let's say, take the example of the CRM, need to buy a CRM. However, in my experience, a lot of times the executives might not be interested, or they delegated this downwards. So what can you do? One example was connect them to executives from your company, give it meaning. Another way, what I did, and that quite worked well in the past, I'd write a handwritten note to the said CTO, to the said CMO, informing him of the progress of the POC, showcasing him those use cases, saying, hey, look, we're running this use case with Department X, this use case with Department Epsilon, and this actually means that value for you, impacting you on this business initiative. This has worked well with me in the past. Obviously, you can do multiple reach outs. It's a numbers game. Some things work better, some things convert better. Does that answer your question? Perfect. Go ahead.
So if you're just starting out in sales, what would be your advice in order to get big deals?
Take as much help internally as possible. So I would say my first deal, which was in the 6 figures, I kind of made the mistake not always asking for things internally. And it's really, you're the orchestrator of things. So you need to run that. You're the project manager. The worst thing you can have is somebody saying no internally. Your VP saying, I don't have time for it. I don't want to do it. Or it's your CEO saying no. Or resource constraints and you don't have the resources. Push as hard as possible. If you're convinced and you have the argument that there's a 6-figure deal out there, your company would be stupid not to give you the resources. And I mean, we're all learning. That's why we're obviously all here. So I think a lot of times us salespeople need to admit where we are and what we still need to learn and where we need help. I think that's the best advice I can give you. We definitely use conferences. So we have, I would say, a very pragmatic, flexible marketing approach. So we look at what the opportunities are out there, what has been successful for us. This has been either way addressing larger audiences when it comes to user groups, being at conferences, such as an AWS summit here in Berlin, where there's like, I would say 7,000 people, 7,000 visitors. But at the same time, we'd run smaller circles of executive dinners. We tried this doing ourselves. We tried this facilitated by companies which are more experienced by it. Yeah.
And what is more successful, the one you organize by yourself or the one sponsored by others?
Usually it's the one which is facilitated by a more experienced company which is running those circles regularly, because it's not so vendor focused, it's more topic focused, and there's trust between the visitors and the organization which organizes the event, rather than a vendor obviously pushing to invite executives saying, hey, I want to sell to you.
One last question.
Go ahead.
How do you get the priority that your product is a must-have, a must-buy, and not a nice-to-have?
I think the only way is that you have a rational argument of revenue or cost saving, and that you can really underline this with either way departments saying that sales guy is telling the truth, we will be losing that much money if we're not going for the solution, or saying, hey, we're losing that amount of money, we're not making that amount of money if we don't purchase that tool. At New Relic, we have the advantage that we're a highly analytical tool, so I can go into the platform when I run a POC and actually show people that they're losing money and show them throughout the POC how we're making them money. So that's a luxurious situation, but I think at any kind of company you have the possibility to do that and show the value in terms of rational numbers.
All right, guys, put your hands together for Julian.